So for anybody that was hopefully saw the VMC and AWS presentation, this is almost like a part 2 to that. And I followed a very similar path with this presentation as I did with that one. And knowing that the audience is very diverse and I've got things from CIOs to engineers here. So I want to make sure that we keep this valuable for everybody that is attending, and because we appreciate that. So you're going to see where I'm going to build some foundations and then double click in a little deeper so the more technical people in the audience will be able to grasp and hold the concepts a little better and easier. So with that, I'm going to kick on through. So the infrastructure that everybody wants, and that's why you're here, I'm sure, is you're looking for this type of infrastructure. You've probably seen this slide in my presentations before, because I think it is one of the best depictions of what hybrid or public or what hybrid cloud or multi-cloud environments look like. And to build on this a little bit more, this is where you're looking at yourself today inside your data center. You've got your on-prem DC, and that's your little cloud that you can hold and love and squeeze, and we've done it for so long. But the world's changing now, and we need to make sure that we're following down the path of agility and workload mobility. So it's inevitable. I'm sure most people on this call already have some AWS inside their environment. And if they don't, they've probably got a little Azure, and there's not enough clouds on here. Otherwise, I would have GCP or IBM or some other ones that are sitting in here, because that's the direction that all industries are moving right now, whether it's just SaaS services or whether it's services from these cloud providers that are important to be associated with your workloads. So having that portability is really critical and important to the longevity and agility of your organizations. So, when you're looking at how can we do this, because portability between AWS and Azure is not necessarily very friendly unless you can build that through with a common stack. And that's the case, that's the secret here, is having that that standardized stack across those cloud providers, and having something to be able to work to push that workload around. So as you're looking at it, that's where Cloud Foundation actually fits into this mix. That is what VMware Cloud Foundation is the ability to have a platform for you to be able to push your workloads around and not have to care necessarily where they are, and you can put them in the right place for the right costs. So that's a little bit of an overview of what you're going to see for the rest of this presentation, and understanding each one of these components a little deeper and better. So inside, when you're looking at that multi-cloud vision, all right, you want to be able to have any device or any application in any cloud, and you want to be able to move these things around, and you want to make sure that you're maintaining the security as you're pushing these things around, because obviously security is a big concern here. And it doesn't matter what type of applications or workloads you're looking at, whether it's traditional apps, traditional monolithic apps, or VMs, or some cloud native apps with containers. It doesn't really matter what you're looking for or what you're leveraging. You want to make sure that you have it and you can run it where it's necessary, and sometimes it's just bursting. Those are some of the pieces that become important to businesses, especially in 2020. Who knows what's going to happen next that's going to cause us to have to pivot further or differently. So if I have to move workloads, it's easy for me to be able to do that with the few clicks of a button, as long as all of the plumbing is put in place properly. So VMware Cloud Foundation is what starts to blur those lines, just like I kind of equated a little bit to, and I've already said, it's a platform that we're looking on where it has that common infrastructure with the common operations with the security baked right inside of it. It's not something that we're going to have to bolt on after, say, okay, now how am I going to make this work? I almost look like we're abstracting out all of that hardware and all of the infrastructure components. They're all being abstracted away, very similar to the way that we did with vSphere. When you think back to when you first installed vSphere, you were first leveraging vSphere, and that aha moment when I got to do that vMotion, you were just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I just moved a workload from one physical box to another physical box. And that's the situation that you're doing now, but now I'm moving it from one cloud to another cloud. You know, that's, and being able to control and manage that is pretty significant. So, you know, traditional data centers, they're unable to keep up. It's really a bit of a challenge with those traditional architectures. The way they have the control and security and compliance are there, and you know, they're typically very performant. However, they do have some other components that tend to be a little bit more of a challenge with the life cycle behind some of that stuff. You know, you've got some significant challenges as you're looking at support matrices and everything else as you're looking to do these upgrades. And a lot of times you've got some underutilized investments there because they become pretty siloed and stuck together inside of these places inside the organization, I'll say. You know, in public clouds, you know, that's the piece about public clouds that everybody likes, is that consumption model and that easy on demand and easy to use. You know, it's kind of like that easy button. All right. So we just want to move the easy button for you now from from just public clouds to be able to put it inside of everything. You know, don't get me wrong, public clouds got some of their own challenges when you look at them, whether it's shadow IT or compliance, and some of the costs associated with them can be pretty significant as you start to look and you know, you started out, oh, this $500 a month bill isn't so bad, but when it's $50,000 a month, now it becomes a little bit more a little more painful, because it's so easy to be able to expand, and that ticker just keeps climbing up. So as you look around and you say, okay, it's a big balancing act that people are using now. I want to be able to have the traditional apps and some of the cost focus that's sitting on side of the traditional side, but in the public cloud, I really like that app focus and the agility that brings to it. So we need to be able to pull all of this together to make it easier for everybody to be able to leverage. So we're looking at that cloud operating model. As I said, you know, that easy button for your data centers. And as we look at things today, you know, I point to public and private cloud very frequently, but, you know, we don't want to leave out the edge, because edge computing is just as important in a lot of situations, depending upon the vertical and the business model that people are leveraging today. So when you look at the VMware Cloud Foundation, and here's, you know, a high overview of the components with vSphere, vSAN, NSX, the vRealize suite, and the king of the castle, the SDDC manager. Now, they build this platform for universal workloads. And then what you do is you can build on top of it any of the services that are required for making sure that you can deliver any of the pieces of the puzzle that you need, whether it's the virtual desktops or the containers. You know, any of these pieces of the puzzle can be laid right on top of the services that are deployed on top of this foundation. Like I said before, kind of abstracting away all the hardware, because end of the day, we don't care. You don't care. Workloads are very similar. It doesn't matter what's sitting on the bottom. I don't care if it's a VxRail or a vSAN ready node. It doesn't matter what's sitting underneath that from a hardware perspective. So the Cloud Foundation, when you're looking at it, and why, what makes this so friendly, is because it's that standardized architecture that's been tested and validated for any workloads across that you're going to have to drop on it. As I said, either virtual machines or containers. You know, it doesn't matter. Each one of them will work, and they're all sitting still on top of the pillars that we've looked at all along, with the compute and the storage and the networking and security all built right inside. So the fully integrated infrastructure for the hybrid cloud, it's simple. All right, and it's simple because you're using standardized building blocks. You look, you know, very similar to the Lego approach. We take these components, we stack them together, and we deploy across them, providing us with the resiliency that we're looking for. They're consistent because we are reusing again, like I said, those building blocks, those same pieces of the puzzle. You know, the infrastructure and the operations piece of this is all the same. And it's secure because security is built in. It's not bolted on. Obviously, VMware went the extra step with the acquisition of Carbon Black to ensure that all of this is all built right inside of the environment and not bolted on by trying to shrink down that vendor portfolio that they were faced as an organization, trying to make sure that they were secure. I have a slide later on that's going to dig in pretty deep as far as so you can identify where security is put across this platform. In all of the pieces, in all of the components that are making it as secure as it is. And I think the most important component here is the consumability of it, because it's very developer friendly. So you've got all of the APIs exposed for them to have the infrastructure that they need, when they need it, how they need it. It's not, I have to wait for my ops team to be able to provide this infrastructure for them to be able to use, or for them to have to go, you know what, the ops team's taking too long, I'm going out to the cloud, and now I've got my $50,000 cloud bill that's not really justified in that situation. So the building blocks associated with this, and you're going to see some of these pictures very frequently for the remainder of this presentation. You know, you're looking at compute with vSphere. It's really the data center operating system. You know, you look at it, and high 80s, 90% of the people actually leverage vSphere inside the data center. vSAN, enterprise grade storage solution, and NSX, VMware's microsegmentation component to be able to control that network, to be able to get it wherever you have to go. And then management with vReal, the whole vRealize suite. All right, these are some of the key tenets to be able to make all this, I'll say all the magic happen here. But what you can then do is, once you've got these components all laid inside here, you can then deploy things like Horizon on top of this, or Enterprise PKS or TKG with the new verbiage. I don't want to confuse people too much inside of here, but I am going to talk about this in a couple different ways. So some of this is focused around 3.9, 3.10, or I'll say from 3.8 to 3.10 from a compatibility and functionality perspective, and then the 4.0 stuff that just came out. I'm going to touch on that on the tail end of the presentation. So you can see some of the differences behind here. There's certain places where you would want to deploy to one and not necessarily the other yet. So as we're talking through this, I'll give you some pointers, but if you have any questions that were deeper or more pertinent to your environment, I would gladly, we can gladly set up a meeting, and I'll gladly help and talk through some of the caveats associated with some of these. So as we look at these, and as I said, the SDDC manager is really the king of the castle here, and he's the one that's doing he's doing a lot of the work associated with it. So you've got vSphere, vRealize, NSX, and vSAN as the core tenants and components inside of these environments. But the other component that's really important is I'm just going to use the term domain. So the SDDC manager will actually bring up these domains, it deploys the domains, it configures the domains, it applies the policies, and then does the patching and upgrades associated with the lifecycle management of each of the domains that it actually creates. Okay, so that's really important from your operational efficiencies. When we look and say, okay, what's one of the most important things to make things invisible is to improve that operational efficiency, so you can now focus on the business and not keeping the lights on, and how am I going to do these upgrades? So I'm going to double click a little bit here down into, here's the workload domain. What is a workload domain? It's really a purpose-built SDDC environment. That's really what it is, where we want to make sure it's software defined. So it's, dedicated vSAN ready nodes, dedicated virtual center, and NSX manager, and you can create, expand, and delete each one of these independently with no impact to any of the other environments. All right, so like I said, you've got that automated provisioning, and you can roll across, you can automatically deploy things like Horizon or enterprise PKS without, you know, any intervention. Some of these things are not trivial to do the installations behind. I can have up to 15 workload domains inside of a single Cloud Foundation instance, and you configure multiple vSphere clusters per workload domain. So I don't have to have just one cluster. Some people think that that's one cluster per one domain. It's one virtual center, not necessarily one cluster. And now when you look at this a little bit across, all right, you've got your external interfaces and your software flexibility. So for your external interfaces, you've got things like hybrid cloud mobility. This is how I'm moving some of them workloads around. Some API integrations for your developers, and then, you know, the ability to capitalize on some of those existing investments with the likes of your storage arrays. All right, so whether it's fiber channel, iSCSI, it doesn't matter. NFS, we can drop them, we can mount them in. Obviously, it doesn't do the lifecycle management behind your external storage controllers, but any of the things that that is connecting to it, you can get your lifecycle done. And then the third-party plugins to be able to pull this down. And if you look at this environment right now that I have here from just a sample, I know a lot of the people that are on this call today have multiple domains. When you're looking at, I'm running desktops, and I'm also running my virtual infrastructure. Now you've got two different workloads. This is an ideal situation from a management perspective. It helps you roll in a VCF around this, and now I've got lifecycle management for both of those environments as I move forward to improve those operational efficiencies. So it's not like this has to be a big lift. This starts as little as 4 nodes in a consolidated approach. So there's two different deployment options here, consolidated and standard. I don't really dig too much into them, but there are 2 different options. So it's just to let you know that it can start out really small. So when you're looking at what does the workload domain look like, you know, so you've got your management component. So the management domain is the top component here, and then you've got your prod and dev, and this is from an NSX type look and feel, because that's one of the places that has some differences, I'll say. When you look at 3.9, it's the workload management, the management domain is using NSXV and not NSXT, and then you can deploy NSXT to your workload domains. And when you do that, the first one gets deployed into your first workload domain, the NSXT edges can, and then the subsequent domains will actually leverage those NSXT edges that you actually put in your first domain. So you're not continuing to deploy them if you don't want to. You have the choice to handle things how you want to, but like I said, it's NSXV inside of the workload, inside the management, and NSXT is deployed for your regular workload domains. So you're leveraging some of the same components over and over again without impacting each other. So you've heard me mention the management domain. So the management domain, typically in a standard configuration, is 4 nodes. We stand up 4 nodes, that becomes your management domain, and that's where all of your management components will be sitting. All right. So it is it's created when you're during the bring up process, and it's built on vSAN and NSXV in 3.9 or 3.10. And as I said, the infrastructure components that you're looking at, so you're looking at any of the management stuff. So SDDC manager, obviously sitting there, your platform services controllers, virtual center, NSX components, any of the vRealize stuff. You can put in any of your own management stuff inside of these domains. You know, I say, you know, so whatever backup software you may want, and you need a proxy, or you need a backup server, or you need your Active Directory, or my monitoring, or my any other security stuff. You know, you can drop those virtual machines or contain right inside of that management domain. And yeah, the bottom bullet here is important. So any of the virtual centers and NSX manager instances for all of the workload domains will run in the management domain, because as I said, each workload domain gets its own virtual center. So that way there, it gives you that control to be able to do individual upgrades based off of workload domain, and not one swell swoop across the whole thing. I've seen other manufacturers that said, oh, hang on a second, we're going to do an upgrade, but we can't do a single node upgrade. I have to do the whole blade chassis or whatever at one time. So that can be very problematic and cause security vulnerabilities because you can't do some patching. So we want to make sure that we stay out of those weeds. So after the workload domain, or after the management domain, you want to create your virtual infrastructure domain, or the VI domain. And this is what you would typically see for your servers. So it doesn't, whatever it is, whatever your current virtual machines are, that's what you would put in here. So it's a dedicated virtual center with a shared SSO with your management domain, but it can be a minimum of 3 hosts with a maximum of whatever vSphere version is applied at that time. And like I said, you have your choice where if you want to leverage some of your SAN, you're using Extreme IO, or using your NetApp or whatever it is, you want to pump that storage in here, you can do that as well. And creating, expanding, shrinking, adding hosts, removing them, it doesn't matter. You can do that all automated via policy. And as you saw, or as I stated before, this is all based off of the standard architecture. So when you're looking at 3.9, in this situation, as I said, there's a few different builds that are out there. You're going to notice that this is all built on vSphere 6.7 U3. And it does have NSXV in here for the management domain as stated, and it does leverage NSXT as well. And you can see you've got Horizon, Enterprise PKS, and all of the vRealize suite that's tied into this right now for that version. And the SDDC managers obviously matches the version of VCF that you're actually deploying. I'm going to show you one very similar to this for 4.0 in a little bit. So VMware's Cloud Foundation solution benefits, there are a few. I'm not going to read through these, but the ability to have that software defined capability with the cloud elastic capabilities and the automation. Automation is really the component here. There's so many tasks that are always being automated, and I'm going to double click down into a lot of these as we walk through. So the software defined agility. You got to remove those constraints of the hardware. We can't be focused on this storage array and this firmware and these pieces, and that's where the automation behind this and understanding the pieces and parts when you're using those standardized building blocks. And I say standardized building blocks. It can be I can use Dell servers and HP servers and vSAN ready node configuration and have very similar experiences, as long as they've got the capabilities and the partnerships with VMware to be able to automate their life cycle, then that's being done. And HP and Dell obviously are doing a good job from that side of the house to be able to ensure your experience is as seamless as possible. And I have a slide that's going to look a little deeper into that. But the important component here is remove it when you're looking at that is everything's got to be software defined, whether it's compute, storage, networking, security, all of it is you're looking at it. And why do you want it to be software defined? Because if it's software defined, I don't have to worry about, oh, I got to add this piece of hardware. I have to move this cable. Everything is pulled around a policy. And when everything's pulled around a policy, I now have the capability to control things a lot easier and a lot more fluidly. And it doesn't, and again, I can move this workload from my on-premises Dell servers to VMC and AWS i3 instances. It doesn't really matter as long as I got the piping there and the ability to migrate that workload or the group of workloads. It doesn't really matter. So that's why you want to make sure that you're making some of that, or you're making all of that hardware invisible. So the modern cloud platform, as you've heard me call this a platform multiple times, you're looking for that common operational consistency across all of them. So when you're leveraging the same pieces and parts and you're leveraging the same management components, this is going to allow you to be able to do that. And it doesn't matter if you've got your private cloud on the left-hand side or your edge solution on the right-hand side with the hyperscalers in the middle across the bottom here, whether it's AWS or Azure or GCP, IBM, any of the supported clouds are going to be able to be in there to help. So from a platform itself, we have to make sure that we're looking at this from the traditional and the modern applications. All right, so you've got that software flexibility and the advanced infrastructure mapping capability. So as you're deploying some of these workloads, you look and you say, okay, I have to have some database workloads that are going to be common, and I have a big database footprint, or I'm going down the container path, and I want to start looking at some of those workload domains for just containers, so I can specialize the hardware around it, or I can specialize, because they look at things different from NUMA nodes and everything else, from containers to virtual machines at times. Or I got to have GPU enabled servers, so I can take my machine learning servers and my desktop servers and possibly blend them across depending upon what you're trying to do from a machine learning perspective. Sometimes they're different GPUs, so you might have to keep them separate, but it's okay to be able to leverage the hardware where applicable, as long as you are consistent across the ones that you're using. But as I said before, the hardware choice is really, it doesn't matter. You've got whoever you want to be able to leverage, you can. So elastic scale, this is, as I stated before, this is something where you can stand this environment up on as little as 4 nodes. So that would be your littlest footprint. So then you can expand this out and say, in a consolidated state, and start to push my workloads in there as well, and just expand out from that perspective. Or you can look and say, what, I want to swing back my management domain, and I want to stand up some other workload domains to be able to separate those workloads out, because I'm starting to have a need to be able to do that for that agility, and the business is growing because I am agile. So in doing that, obviously the dev team is now starting to grow because that's the secondary path to agile, is leveraging those dev to replatform some applications so they are more friendly from a cloud native perspective. But all of a sudden you had an issue, and your VDI environment all of a sudden got pushed further than what it was designed for. It's very easy to now peel back that PKS environment and expand your VDI environment. Because you've got that flexibility of workload, I can shrink and expand any of these workload domains as needed. So it doesn't have to be, oh, once I added this in here, I'm stuck and I can't pull that hardware back out. So now it becomes nice to have some of that hardware free and capable to be able to move things around. We've done that, those type designs leveraging some Cisco blades in the past, where they had the capability to be able to push some workloads around, or to repurpose some of those blades with profiles in their hardware. Now, this is kind of like taking that on steroids now, because it's much easier to be able to move some of these around once you've got that standardized software layer across the top of this. So, I've mentioned LIFECYCLE a few times here, and as you look at this, I figured a picture is going to do this way more justice than what I could from just speaking. So as you're looking at these components, and we're all very familiar with the compute of vSphere and the storage with vSAN, the NSX, and the management components inside the vRealize stack. And I know, nobody looks forward to anything more than doing a good upgrade. There's nothing probably more horrific at times than doing those upgrades, because you have to look, and as you're looking at them, they don't all just check, okay, all the bullets are going to line up, or we're just going to move everything in one swell swoop. Each time, everybody's upgrading differently. Security patches are come out for different pieces of the puzzle at different times. So you have to make sure that those are all there. So you've got different dependencies. And when you start to look at the VMware compatibility matrix, you're like, oh, wait a second, I have to go over here. And then this one, these pieces are only good over there. So I have to be at this version so I can then upgrade here. And then I have to go back and then I can upgrade further down the stack as I get to the different compatibility components. You know, I'm a big fan of planning, but the planning behind this is usually significantly more than the actual process itself, because there's so much research that has to go into it. And, you know, obviously I'm just showing you software versions here, never mind any of the hardware drivers and everything else associated with the lower components inside of here. That's where the SDDC manager, so the lifecycle manager inside of SDDC manager actually gets to take over for you. Because you can apply those updates, as I've mentioned, to any one of the clusters, or any one of the workload domains inside of your environment individually. So it doesn't have to be an all or none approach. And it's a very repeatable process. So, you know, it's all bundle driven, update notifications. You get to review them, schedule them, and then monitor and report across when you're looking to do the next one. So the full lifecycle manager starts to fall inside of the SDDC and not onto you or your staff, so depending upon, you know, who it is. It definitely can make operational efficiencies way more friendly than trying to go down the path of the traditional build approach. This starts to get you down that VMC and AWS path. Like I said in the beginning, this is almost like a part 2 to that, because VMC and AWS is built around all of this as well. So you're just consuming that. So this is almost giving you the ability to almost just consume your own infrastructure in that very same way, with a few clicks to do your upgrades when applicable. So the automated deployment of Horizon, when you start looking at that, you know, that's things that, you know, I know there's people that are on this webinar right now that have looked to SMP to come do your Horizon deployments. You know, these are things where it absolutely can help you to be able to do this, because it's deploying, it can deploy the full stack, as you see here, the Horizon servers, app vols. It's actually DEM now, not instead of UEM, but unified access gateways, all of the pieces and parts. So installing it, and then you can actually look in, you know, it does your upgrades. So when you start looking at all of the pieces of the puzzle that this can actually do to save you operationally, and on the front side of things from a deployment perspective, if you were looking from not having your team do it, because typically you don't do that, and this is being now deployed as per the VMware validated designs, so you know that there's no guessing as to how this is being done. And the same thing can be said for PKS or TKG, depending upon the new naming. TANZU Kubernetes Grid is what was PKS. But you know, when you start to look at what this deployment here is, if for those that aren't aware, if you look at the deployment of Horizon, this can be significantly more complex and more drawn out than what a Horizon deployment is. This could be, you know, when you look at Horizon, and Horizon can be, you know, weeks to months. This can be months to years to be able to try and get some of this deployed, to be able to have this all deployed in a simple form following VMware's validated designs is a huge value associated with that as well. So the data center automation, when you're looking at how this is happening and what some of the things that SDDC Manager is actually doing, as I said, there's many automated tasks that it can do, but the rapid deployment and scale, the best practices. And I like to say, you know, that's the tail end of that is really the important bits there. It's to VMware's validated designs. And you have that policy-based flexibility based off of that. So from a day 2 type operation, replacing SSL certs and password updates and rotations, all of this can be handled all through the SDDC manager. And then day N, any of the workload controls and lifecycle management can all be done, or as I've mentioned, the PKS or the Horizon deployments, all of these pieces, deploying some of the management components, all happen right through the SDDC manager. So what are some of the clients that have leveraged this? What are the things that they're looking at? Is you're looking at that that improved operational efficiencies that you're really looking to trying to get to here, with the reduction of complexity and the improvement of agility. It really starts to make things a whole lot easier from your environment, and it starts to make the IT department look like heroes as you're looking and saying, okay, everything is now way more stable, way more controlled. It's much less of a, how am I going to get there? Or what, oops, there was a hiccup, there was a bump, oh, that patch didn't go as planned. These are all tested and validated paths that we're looking to walk down. So as I mentioned, when you start looking at VCF version 4, so 4 was just dropped, 4.0 update, or 4.0.1, I think is what it actually was. So what is it bringing to the table? So it's the platform for modern apps, okay? You're looking, not only is it, and when I say modern, I say that pointedly because, it has the VM capability, but it also has containers. And I don't have to deploy PKS to get my native Kubernetes experience inside of this platform. So you get the latest and greatest with vSphere 7, vSAN 7, NSXT in the management domain now, and the full vRealize 8 suite. And you get enhanced lifecycle management. So that's definitely something that's a big improvement over leveraging something like Update Manager in the past. And then, as I said, the networking topology consolidation, I don't have to worry about NSXV and NSXT. It's all just NSXT across the whole infrastructure, which definitely can be a positive. So so this is the cloud operating model, and this, because it gives you the capability to have both of those. But let's face it, there's still complexities, there's still challenges that we all have to look at with some of the new things that are coming, as I was stating around PKS. So modern apps, they're complex. They're not necessarily easy, all right? But because you're looking to have more users on more devices, accessing more apps from more locations than we ever have in the past. Apps and data are moving out of the traditional data centers to multiple clouds, to branch offices, to the edge, as I was stating before. All new apps are no longer monolithic. You're looking at, oh, here, I need some containers. I need this stood up so you can start to do that, to leverage some new providers. So some of the challenges behind modern apps, and this is as you start to see the Kubernetes clusters are serverless, as you're looking at some of those functions, what are some of the apps that they need, the vGPUs, or what databases are pinned to them? How is this being handled? So from a developer standpoint, they've got some challenges with the lack of modern developer services. Any of the type of day 2 lifecycle management of the infrastructure. Typically those are some challenges that they see if they're not walking down some of those modern app infrastructures. When you look at the IT operator, they have some significant challenges as well. Some of it mostly relies around security and some of the infrastructure that is looked at, and how are they doing the lifecycle management of some of these components. It's not necessarily common, or it's definitely a net new way of thinking. So having these things buckled in or bundled in together is going to start to make it easier for both sides of your house to be able to function more efficiently and ensure that you don't get those $50,000 a month cloud bills. So when you look at version 4 of VCF, all right, so as you can see, you've got SDDC Manager version 4, and you've got vSphere 7, vSAN 7, and NSX-T3 are your core components here. But then you've got all of the vRealize suite and Workspace ONE Access, but you'll notice that you don't have the Horizon ability to pre-deploy here, or the PKS. Well, PKS is built in to vSphere 7 a little bit. Well, not really. So you've got a container capability with vSphere 7. So that's not as concerning, but yeah, obviously there's some more things when you're looking at some manual deployment of some of these services in their current state. And that's when I said when we started this that we would have to look at some of the caveats of some of the things that we're looking to try and do and capitalize on as we're moving forward. This was a big release from a component perspective, the core pillars. So the other pieces that you saw in the 3X family is going to be lined in here or laid in the near future. It's just not here now. And all of you that know me know I don't like to talk about the futures because I don't know when they're actually going to happen. So I much rather let you know what you can do today and make sure that we can achieve your needs based off of that. So as you're looking at this, the platform, what are some of the components inside that platform? So Project Pacific extended the VCF to new clients because it looked and it said, here, I got converged platforms that VMs and containers can run together without having anything extra. I don't have to worry about laying PKS inside of here or worry about the VIC and its non-ability to do any lifecycle management behind the containers other than just running them. These are all things that were actually built right inside. So enhanced by obviously Kubernetes being built right inside of vSphere now. You don't have to worry about it. So you've got those declarative APIs that developers are looking for. And then you've got that application-centric management based off of Kubernetes. So, but how? How is this all working? You've got the TANZU portfolio. All right. So when you look at it, you're going to build your environments with the cloud native platform based off of Bitnami and Pivotal. And then you manage it with TANZU Mission Control that is also leveraging Bitnami, Cloud Health, and Wavefront to be able to help you manage it. And then you run it on TKG or TANZU Kubernetes Grid. This is the framework that's actually been put in place for those modern applications, all those cloud native applications. So when you're looking at it from the last slide here, the developers got that the TKG, so that way they can run those Kubernetes. They've got those APIs that they're looking for, and life is wonderful for them to be able to tie into all of the rest of the TANZU components that are all developer-minded pieces of the puzzle. And then from the hybrid infrastructure and cloud components, you've got the vSphere pod service and registry service for them to be able to look and say, okay, this is how I can start to use this with the registry service from the container side of the house, or leveraging that vSphere pod service to make sure that we've got the proper configurations that are sitting there. So inside of that platform, so like I said, it's developer-ready infrastructure. I don't have to worry about how am I going to get here and do the things I need to do. With a universal platform, so the VMs and containers can both cohabitate without any challenges. Lowest cost TCO, your mileage is going to vary here depending upon what you've got from an infrastructure perspective. But it is the foundation for the cloud where you can start to move those workloads around. As I stated in the beginning, you look at any workload on any cloud for the right price with the right resiliency. So the latest and greatest components of the stack. The vSphere building blocks, for the modern cloud. So what's new? So that streamlined deployment with the Kubernetes grid, agile operations, and accelerate innovation. So you've got that predictable quality of service for time critical apps as you're looking at these as they're bundled together as a solution and not just pieces and parts. So I mentioned that, the security component in the beginning, and I thought it was really important to make sure that I called this out so people can see all of the pieces of the puzzle that are secure, because you hear a lot of people, oh, security, yeah, they like to say it's built in instead of bolted on. That's, it's getting to be a very overused statement. You're looking at networking, you've got that microseg or VPN or, the secure end user. And then when you look at the compute pieces, we've got VM level encryption, encrypted vMotion, and multi-factor authentication. Your storage is got data at rest encryption, and it also has cluster level key management with hardware agnostic. So there's no self-encrypting drives that you have to worry about. It has some of the highest security certifications that you can get. And then from a management perspective, you've got the Container Registry Service and the vSphere Trust Authority. The Container Registry Service is really pretty cool, and it includes a best-in-class container registry with built-in vulnerability scanning and image scanning and auditing, all built right inside of that registry service. It's really, a great way to have visibility inside of those containers. So in vSAN 7, you've got a simpler lifecycle management that's associated with it, and you also have integrated file services. So now that you've got the capability to have those integrated file services, you can now have enhanced cloud native storage. So this is going to make it a lot more friendly for those containerized workloads. So the simpler lifecycle management. So it's got the vSphere Lifecycle Manager is what's going to be able to do this. And this is where this is one of the slides that's actually showing you where Dell EMC and Hewlett Packard or HP are putting things together a little bit easier from a capabilities perspective from the hardware side of the house. So it's helping from that perspective with that Lifecycle Manager. And then the native file services, as I was stating before, you start to look, and it gives you the ability to have NFS out of the box. So it's a unified storage management for both block and file, and it supports NFS 4.1 and 3 protocols. So from a hardware management perspective, all right, we've got those consistent ESXi hosts. So the management of the firmware from within vSphere it all works in conjunction with Dell OpenManage or HPE OneView. It's also looking at the vSphere compatibility guide and the hardware compatibility lists that are all published by VMware, and it uses the recommendation engines and removes so you don't have to worry about those unsupported drivers or firmware or whatever it may be. And you do have the full GUI or the REST APIs. Obviously, you've got both sides of the house. Some people love the GUI. Some people, I hate the GUI and I want to use those REST APIs. So I want to make sure that you've got whatever's required for the environment. So the cluster image, it's kind of funny that the other day I just had a client that was looking for, I have to install ESXi and I don't know can you make sure that I have the right ISO so I can do that install? Because different manufacturers, different CDs or different ISOs, different drivers, whatever it's the latest one, it can be confusing at times. So it's nice that now the cluster image management actually starts to pull all this stuff together, the versions of ESXi, which firmware is associated, and any of the drivers that are needed are all pulled together inside of that one image, so you don't have to worry about it. So comparing how, this is a good analogy, this is a good view, and this is the slide I was talking about before that gives you an understanding when you're looking at what pieces of the puzzle am I using? what are my building blocks? And just because I'm using one building block doesn't mean I can't switch to use a different building block. So when you're looking at something like a vSAN ready node, you can see here that, you can do the ESXi and vSAN upgrades, but any of the vCenter, NSX, vRealize, none of that stuff is built into that process of doing upgrades. So some of the hardware drivers are built in with HP and Dell. They do, like I said, they're doing a good job associated with that. And some of the updates are called out there as well. You take the step up and say, okay, I'm going to leverage VxRail because it's got the capability to do a lot more of these pieces of the puzzle for me. So it's going to, now I can do the automated upgrade of your virtual center, and I can do, all the hardware that's built inside of it, any of the drivers, any of the firmware, all that stuff is all pre-bundled together and all schedulable and moves on down the path. But when you look at the Cloud Foundation with the SDDC manager, you can now see how each one of those is starting to line up. So if you look at leveraging something like the Cloud Foundation and SDDC manager with VxRail and the Rail manager, because that's what SDDC manager basically does, is from all the hardware stuff, it just passes down to the Rail manager and says, here, take care of the rest of this stuff for me while I focus on the other pieces of the upgrade. So you end up with a full upgrade capability when you're looking at Cloud Foundations with VxRail. So from a packaging and licensing, sorry, the vSphere 7 with Kubernetes, that was the one thing, and I wanted to make sure I called it out because I hate to say all the good and not mention any of the bad, and set a false expectation. So with vSphere 7, there was a lot of talk about how I can use Kubernetes, and I can, we're built right into vSphere, and that is a true statement as long as you're using Cloud Foundation. So there's no way to get to containers natively inside of vSphere without using Cloud Foundation. I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. Again, you can see here that the vSphere add-in for Kubernetes and some of the pieces that are included inside of there, like TKG and all the other services associated with it, and it is just an add-on license or an add-on subscription. So here I'm going to review a little bit from where we started. So here's our favorite picture, and what it would look, what our desired look would be, and how we would get there. These are the pieces of the puzzle that we look to try and leverage. And what hyperscalers aside, it can be any one of them. But what you want to be able to do is be able to string all these pieces together. It doesn't matter necessarily the pieces in the puzzle, because we don't care. We want them to be invisible anyways. How do I get there? I've thrown a lot out there over the last 55 minutes. I would say the first thing you do is probably call us, so we can give you a hand, help provide some of that guidance to make sure you understand any of the caveats or the pieces of the puzzle that may be a little bit gray, that you need a little more color painted in there for. We can easily help you get through that process to understanding where you have to be and how to get there, and help you down the path from the deployment the deployment aspects of it as well. So what I want to do is, close by how does it all work, and kind of stitching all these pieces of the puzzle together. So here's your basic data center rack with a minimum of 4 ready nodes in it. You can fill the rack with vSAN ready nodes. It doesn't matter how many you've put in there. For some organizations that are on this WebEx, it might be described in racks and not necessarily in nodes. Some of them might say, you know what, can I just have a half a rack because I only have 8 total nodes? Something along those lines. It doesn't matter. Just give you an idea. All these are pulled together with your copper rack switches and your management switch, wherever you want to put those to be able to control the out-of-band management. Your first 4 nodes, we're going to stand up your management workload domain. All right, then we're going to put your virtual infrastructure domain in there at whatever it may be, and then we'll add your secondary one, which is your desktop infrastructure. And, this is very typical from a lot of the people that I know that we have worked with in the past. And then you've got the available capacity of all the pieces in the middle. So like I said, you've got some of these nodes that, oh, my monthly, my end of month processing or end of quarter processing is coming. I want to add a couple more nodes so we can plow through this a little easier. Or, we just had a hiring expansion and I have to add some more VDI nodes. It doesn't, all of that is capable to expand inside that rack. When you look at things though, this scales out to whatever the vSphere configuration maximums are. So you could almost look at it as 14 times 64 is how many nodes that you can have in one VCF environment. So a lot. We make sure that we've got our spine switches on the top of these racks to be able to pin everything together. And then you can easily expand across those racks with the SDDC manager to be able to increase that workload, whatever it may be. I mean, you could do the same thing with your virtual infrastructure domain. It doesn't really matter. And then, you know, as you're looking at this, it all is happy and wonderful. And then 2020 hits with COVID, and we have to now say, how can I now expand? Because I don't necessarily, I've used all of my resources, so I can look at going to something like a VMC and AWS, and I can stitch that into my existing network, and then expand those workloads all the way across. So now I've got that elastic cloud. As I said, I can push those workloads wherever it may be, and whether it's one cluster, two clusters, whatever, however you want to look at it, but it gives you that capability to move those workloads around. Something as simple as HCX to be able to do that is all included inside here. So there's no nothing else that's necessary to make that happen. And with that, I've pulled us right to the end of the hour.